Welcome to the Anglo-Italian pod, and it is the next part of our Away From Home series where we talk about players and managers who have left their home country to broaden their football horizons and see what the world has to offer in their career. This time we are going from Liverpool all the way to Laos with a few stops in between, and we are joined by Steve Darby. Steve, how are you today?
Buongiorno, parlo bene italiano un poco poco.
Oh, that's incredible.
My English is far better.
Me too. So whereabouts are you calling us from, Steve?
Well, I'm now back home in Liverpool. The reality is that my mum is getting old and it was time to do the right thing. My daughter's at A-level age, about to go to university. So it was time to step back for a while. Maybe later go back to Asia. I'd love to because, it's a drug. You miss football and, you miss the dressing room. I don't miss the journalists. I don't miss the administrators, but I miss the dressing room and the lads and just the feeling of football.
Nice, that's beautiful. So we're going to talk about how you got into football and who was the biggest influence on you in your life to get you interested in football? Growing up in Liverpool, I'm assuming it's Liverpool or Everton. Which side of the city are you on?
Well, my dad took me to both. He was a blue. He took me to Liverpool one week, Everton the next week. But the biggest influence, I think, in hindsight, and it probably was at the time, was Shankly. Even though I was just a kid, but the man was like God to me. When he spoke, you listened. And later on, I was lucky enough to meet him. And I only wish there had been phones in those days, but there wasn't. I just sat in a dressing room with him. And it wasn't a conversation, it was a monologue by him. But I was delighted just to listen to the bloke.
What was it like to meet someone? Because he is obviously iconic, not just in Liverpool, but in football in general. Was there an aura around him? How did it feel to meet him?
Yeah, you hear the cliche, don't meet your heroes, they let you down. He didn't. That was, certainly didn't. And I was watching, in those days, you could walk into Melwood and watch them train. And so one day I went to watch Liverpool train. Shankly had retired, and I saw him jogging around the pitch before Liverpool arrived because they used to get changed at Anfield and come down to Melwood then. I thought, this is a chance of a lifetime. I've got nothing to lose. You can either just say, get lost, son, or what? I said to him, morning, Mr. Shankly. I'm about to go abroad to do some coaching. Can you offer me any advice? And the first thing he said, and of course, whenever you meet Shankly, you have to speak in his voice, don't you? And it was like, aye, son, yeah. First thing you must learn is to make tea. And I looked at him, I had no idea what he was talking about. So I had to make him a cup of tea. Sat down in the dressing room with him, and he just talked to me. And, I just wish I'd had a microphone. But, he was what I expected and more. And it's like, I'll be honest, all the good players I've met, the great players, they've all been good blokes. You've had Peter Reid, Brian Robson, who I've worked with, these two, Coach Nicolas Anelka, all good blokes. It's the only few I've ever felt were a bit up themselves were the ones on the layer below who thought they were a bit good. But most of the top pros are really decent people.
Nice. That's incredible. So from that, did you always know you wanted to get into coaching, or were you starting off as playing and then how did you find your way into the football industry?
No, I just like every other kid in Liverpool wanted to be a footballer. And I was lucky. I was a 5'9", 14-year-old goalkeeper. So I got scouted by a few clubs and I went to various trials and I ended up playing in the youth team of Tranmere. Only thing was, I was 5'9" at 14, but I was 5'9" at 18 as well.
Okay, right.
So I'm still 5'9". So I was never going to make it. I mean, some people say it's they've had a severe injury. Mine was a severe lack of ability, you could probably say. And so one of the coaches there said to me, "Son, we've heard you're going to be able to do A-levels," which I was. He said, do your A-levels, go to university and see how it goes. Basically, in other words, you're not good enough, which he was dead right.
It's a politer way of saying it.
Yeah. So I did the A-levels and then I trained as a PE teacher in my that was my second dream. If I couldn't be a footballer, be a PE teacher. And it was quite good. I got my degree and I ended up playing semi-pro and even Liverpool Sunday League, which was great, and getting money in the boot. And so I sort of paid my way through uni by playing football.
Nice.
So I went there, and then basically I just wanted to play again. And then suddenly one day I left college, got a job. I was in Portsmouth. I got a phone call from my old college lecturer, a fellow called Merv Beck. Do you want to go to Bahrain and be a full-time player coach? I didn't even ask about, I always remember I didn't ask about the money. I just said yes. I'll swim there. And I couldn't believe it. I didn't even know where Bahrain was, to be honest. Because that was pre-internet, and you realize how much before the internet we didn't know. So basically, I couldn't believe it. I got on a flight, and it was a business class. I thought this is paradise, a business class. I got a meal on the plane, and the salary was 5 times what I was getting as a teacher. Wow. So that was even better. But the main thing was it was every day playing football, and that's playing and coaching. And I worked with a fellow called Jack Mansell, who was hard but really good. And what would happen? I was working with a team called East Rafah, and then when the national team came into play, I'd go in as like an assistant coach, and that's where I learned a great deal about coaching. And then it was just from then on, wherever I went, it was wherever there's a contract, I went. I never said no. If it was the right contract, I went. And I got sacked from Bahrain because Ayatollah Khomeini came in from Iran, and they were going to. This is 1979, and they were going to. They all thought Iran was going to wipe out Bahrain. It didn't happen. Wow. But they got rid of all the non-essential foreigners. So maybe my coaching was non-essential. And I came back to England, and I got a letter. Well, actually, I didn't get a letter. I got a telegram, which a lot of the younger people on listen to this won't know what a telegram is. But I got a telegram saying, "Do you want to go to Tasmania and play?" I actually first thought, great, I've not been to Africa, and then I suddenly looked on the map and found out where it was. Player coach role again. So I thought, great, I shall go. And I went off to Australia, and I actually stayed there for 17 years. Wow. And then after that was Malaysia. I was Asia after that. But Australia was a fantastic time. That's where I sort of learned to coach, I should say. I'd done my English full badge, and someone had seen me on the coaching course and said, "Look, would you want to come to Tasmania?" They were looking for English coaches to go out to work there. And so I said, "Yeah, And I always remember I got off the plane in a place called Launceston in northern Tasmania, and there was, as you can tell, I was going to be a great success. There was one journalist there who also happened to be the photographer as well, and he said to me, "Can you come down the steps of the plane with your bag over your shoulder, juggling a ball?"
Right. Wow.
I said, "Mate, if I can do that, it'd be Milan Airport, or Mid Airport." And and of course, what I've learned, you always have to adapt to the culture. And what I did was I always read the papers when I first arrived somewhere, just to get local news, feel the place. And I saw football scores, Australian football. It was Cooey 95, Penguin 87. And I thought, what a keeper I'll be here. I'd never heard of Aussie rules football, and it was just.
I'm still not sure what it is. I'll be honest.
It's a magnificent game. Honestly, it really. I played a little bit while I was there, but it was a great game. And once you get to know it, it's a good game. It's like American football. I'd never seen American football really, but when I was in Bahrain, I only worked 2 hours a day. I had nothing else to do. So I taught myself Arabic.
Okay, wow, right.
But I'm illiterate. I can speak it, but I can't, read or write it.
But
the only TV was either Saudi TV at the time, which was a bloke with a beard reading the Quran, which not the best, or Aramco, which was non-stop American football. So I watched that all day, and I really got to enjoy American football. Again, it's been what I think the most essential thing to any person, player or coach going abroad. Adapt to the culture.
Yeah,
you're not going to change the culture. Let's be blunt. You've got to adapt. And the best advice I was given in that area was one of my managers that used the Asian term, the manager, like the CEO. Said, you've got to be like bamboo in Asia. And I said, what do you mean? There's not much bamboo in Anfield, believe me. He said to me, you've got to be able to bend. And don't snap. And the snapping might be getting involved in match fixing or letting the president pick the team and things like that. He said, bend a little bit. You're not going to win all the time. Learn to fight what battle you can win and when it's important. And he was dead right. There's times when I've gone, okay, and there's times when you're not going to win. My international centre forward in Malaysia, he rang me up one morning and said, Coach, I can't come training. I said, right, you're injured, are you sick? No, my mum said I've got to take her shopping.
Right. Okay.
and I said, you're an international. I'm paying you a lot of money to play for us. You've got to train. He says, Coach, you can find me, you can drop me, but if my mum says I'm going shopping with her, that's it. And
well, some things are international. You've got to do what your mum says, right? Some things are just international.
Yeah, and that was exactly right. And I spoke to the team captain, who was a good bloke. He said, Coach, it happens to us all. He said, you're not going to win that one. So I said, okay. And I lost that one, but I had to be a little bit like bamboo and bend. He came back the weekend, played well, scored as usual, and so you forget about it.
Nice. So with that first experience in Bahrain, so you said you're arriving to Bahrain in like 78, 79.
78, yeah, 78, right? Yeah.
What was, like, how big was the culture shock, and what were the first things you had to learn when you arrived? Not just in terms of football, but this is your first opportunity leaving the country and kind of stepping out on your own. What were the biggest lessons that you learned and the biggest culture shock?
Well, firstly, language. And I've realized that language is essential, because in 78, very few people spoke English. My players couldn't, so I had to have a translator. And that was similar in Vietnam in the year 2000. You had translation. But I tried to learn the language everywhere I went. Though it was amazing. We got off the plane, there was a couple of us, and there was a car waiting. And I said, sorry to tell you, lads, I haven't got a license. Oh, don't worry about that, Coach. And so a license appeared, about a few days later with my picture in.
Oh, wow.
So I just taught myself to drive on the road. There wasn't too many cars in those days. But I mean, another culture shock was we trained on sand.
Wow.
And the pitches were marked with oil. But it was, to be fair, it was good sand. You could play a decent game on it. But we played the games in the stadiums on grass. Yeah. But it was that was a culture shock. But I mean, and things like, we had one game against the UAE, and there was crowd trouble. And over there, the police didn't mess about. It wasn't like in England. Police came in with tear gas. And I was laughing my head off, thinking that's funny, watching these tear gas canisters fly into the crowd. But then the wind changed.
Oh, God.
And then I suddenly realized what tear gas does. And it doesn't just make you cry. It's absolutely awful. So that was a bit of a culture shock. Though I met Don Revy out there. He was he was coaching the UAE at the time. And there's quite a few other English people, like Dave Mackay was out there.
Okay.
A fellow called Graham Williams stayed at my house. Now, he played for Wales, and it was West Brom fullback. But he told me, it's a remarkable story. He told me a young long-haired lad from Ireland for Man United made his debut against Graham Williams. He said, so I saw this skinny little long-haired bloke. He thought, I'll kick him. Welcome to football, son. Yeah. And he said it was the biggest mistake he made, because George Best kicked him back, and then turned him into knots. He said, I didn't know where to go. He said, I realized this boy was a bit special, which obviously he was. Yeah.
That's incredible. That's incredible. So through coaching, you were coaching in Bahrain, and then, as you mentioned, the kind of experience came up in Australia, and you're kind of coaching there, kind of technical director type thing. What was your role there, and how difficult was it to develop a game in that country when you have Aussie rules, you have cricket, you have rugby that are so much bigger? Like, what was the standard of football like, and how much was it developing at the time?
Well, I went as a player coach in Tasmania, which was probably the smallest state. And then I was then offered a job of the director of coaching. So basically coaching coaches. and going into schools. So I was able to do that as well as play. So in many ways, it was lucrative in the sense that I was able to make a decent living doing this. And then eventually the reality of football is you either leave or you get sacked anyway. Eventually I resigned. One of the posts I had there, I resigned because you do learn there's politics in football. And no matter what, anyone who says politics and sport doesn't mix is so naive. Football, politics is entrenched. You cannot. Every dressing room's got politics. Who gets the right seat? Who gets the best cup of tea? Who's the captain? There's lots of politics in all areas of sport. In this case, I lost out to the politics because of it, like political interference. So I said, go and get stuffed. That wasn't quite the phrase I used, but it was similar to that. So I ended up then moving across to the mainland of Australia. I worked for the Australian Sports Commission, and then I went to the national body, like the FA, and worked there for 5 years. Now, that was where politics was first, football was second. But it was, I remember just before I got sacked one day, a fella came into me, the new president. I went through about 5 presidents while I was there. The new president came in and said to me, "What's your management text?" And I looked at him and I said, "Oh, sorry, I haven't got one, Didn't know what he's talking about." He says, "Read Machiavelli, The Prince." Being the Italian podcast, you should know that. Yeah. And I went out and got The Prince and I read Machiavelli, and that was perfect. He was spot on. So the Machiavellian text of football was, and in those days, Australian football, I still call it, obviously football, was called soccer there, was very ethnic based. You had Croatians, Italians, Greeks, Serbs, Poles, and they loved football. They loved it. I know though a lot of their children went on to play Aussie rules because again, the culture wins. I might took the view that we were never going to beat Aussie rules in Melbourne and Tassie or rugby league in Sydney, but in other areas, soccer was winning and is getting better and better. And of course, one of the biggest factors now has been the Matildas, the female soccer.
Yes,
because that is booming. I coached the Matildas back in the late 80s, early 90s, and they were fantastic girls, really good, professional in everything they did except getting paid.
Right. Okay.
But now they're getting paid. So, but the change in women's football is incredible. The physical aspect, the technical aspect. They can now knock a 60-yarder. Before it was 30. They can now all head a ball properly. Now they play distinct patterns. But the biggest thing is the power. You don't get any overweight girls playing now. They're all great athletes.
Yeah.
As it should be.
Well, that's it. And I think that happens like in all sports, regardless of like the more professional it gets, the higher the standards become, right? You just have to be a better athlete. You have to be more in shape because the standards are rising. I think and we've seen in Australia now with them just having an incredible World Cup, right? Getting through the group stage when nobody expected it. Could you see the signs that there would be this much development in Australia? Because we know that when they're good at sports, they put money behind it and they are passionate about their sports. Could you see that they were willing to kind of put this development into football?
The players are great in Australia, and there are some superb coaches as well. The problem, of course, appears to be the administration. It just hasn't caught up with the quality of the players. I mean, I was dealing with players like Mark Viduka, Ned Zelic, Frank Farina, Paul Ocon. Those two lads still played in Serie A. I mean, great players. Schwarzer went to the EPL, Cahill and things like this. So there's never a doubt to me about the quality of the player. Never a doubt about the quality of the coaching they were getting from foreign coaches and local coaches as well. But the danger, and it still is, it would appear to be the administration. They just seem to be, a lot of it's good-hearted, but there just seems to be such polarized opinion on how to do things in Australian soccer that I can't see the light at the end of the tunnel. I just cannot. In the women's game, that seems to have evolved a little bit better, maybe less entrenched views.
Oh, okay. Yeah, because there's just been a huge argument in Australia about the crowd violence. I think it was Melbourne City, right? And how the authorities dealt with it, and how they kind of, I've seen a lot of Australian soccer fans saying the soccer fans are being persecuted more than rugby fans would or cricket fans would. It feels like there's a bit of a culture shift there.
Yeah, without a doubt. The Aussie, still thinks it's a game for wogs. I mean, Johnny Warren wrote a book. I think it was called Wogs, Pufters, and Sheelers. So that was what the football was. But I mean, when it comes to the World Cup, when it comes to the national team, that's when it tends to be forgotten. So club level, it's a problem. National team, if Australia's doing well, they get behind it. It doesn't matter who you are. The Aussie rule. I mean, and the thing is, it's not the players, the cricketers, and the Aussie rules players and the league players are real soccer fans as well. At the top level. Steve Waugh, I remember seeing him play. He played for Australian schoolboys football.
Wow.
So, and he loved the game and things. And there was quite a few Aussie rules players who could have played soccer easily. But the main thing was, to be honest, there was more money in Australian rules in the 80s. Now it's different. Now the money's getting a little bit better for Australian soccer players.
Nice. And then after Australia, this is where you get your first kind of managerial role, and you head out to Malaysia. So this is around 98, and you take over Johor FC. Now, this is where you win both the league and cup, Peter, as manager. How did it feel in your first management job, your first full management job of a club, to get some silverware? How did that feel, and how was that as a first experience in management?
Well, basically, I'd been coaching in the National Soccer League in Australia, a team called Sydney Olympic, which was fascinating. It's a Greek-based club. It was just a daily chaos, but it was happy chaos. Probably a good training ground for Asia. But it was really enjoyable. But I've been sacked, and that's not an insult. There's a vast queue of good managers have been sacked from Sydney Olympic. And I got a phone call from my mate Ron Smith, who was in Johor for another team in Johor. And he said, look, do you fancy coming to Malaysia for 6 weeks? He says, Johor could go down. And if they go down, that's like a disaster. If you can keep them up, that'd be great. Come for 6 weeks. I went across. There's luck in the game in football, believe me. I had 2 Aussies there who are new in the Johor team, a fellow called Darren Stewart and Milan Blagojevic, both Australian internationals. And they said to me, Darbs, it's good lads, they're good teams. We shouldn't be where we are. So he said, we just need organising. And what was happening was the management was interfering with the local coach. He was making them train 7 days a week, 2 days, twice a day. So I said, look, we cut it back. We cut back training. We suddenly, for some unknown reason, all the injuries got rid of. Wonder why that happened. But and what happened was we ended up going on an unbeaten run. We rescued relegation, but that was a major thing. But what Ron didn't tell me, probably didn't know, we were still in the cup. And we weren't even considered to, because all the big boys were in the cup as well from the other division. So we just kept on going. And then we ended up winning the FA Cup, and we were the only side ever to win the FA Cup from the second division.
Wow.
And again, what the advice, I get lots of people writing to me for advice, and I say, if you're in Asia, there's only one piece of advice, that's win.
Okay. Right.
You got to win, because there's no long term is next week.
Right.
And if you don't win next week, you're in a crisis. Then you win, and you're a great coach again. But you're not the week after if you lose. So you've got to win as often as you can. And forget, I hate these words, forget this philosophy and this project. It's all about winning.
Okay.
And if you do that, you'll get a better contract. And then once you get your contract, and I tell younger coaches, winning is political power. So if you win and you go on a run of about 5 or 6 weeks, suddenly you may be able to get the plane to the next away game rather than the 12-hour bus trip. When you're losing, a bus turns up. When you're winning, the plane gets invited. Or you might be able to buy 30 new footballs, on all things like this. So it really is, a political aspect is winning, but you've got to win. And luckily we did, because eventually you'll get sacked.
Yeah.
And then after 3 years in Johor, I got sacked.
Yeah.
I actually think in this case I got sacked for the wrong reason, but that's, it wasn't like losing games. Again, it was the political aspect.
Okay.
I learned, again, from mistakes, and I made lots of mistakes. There's certain people you're allowed to upset, and there's other people you're not.
That's often the way, right?
Yeah, and I upset the wrong person, and I was gone. In some countries it's the administrator. In other countries, you don't upset the journalists because they'll murder you. Thailand was that example. I had a journalist just literally writing pure lies about me every day. And
how do you deal with that? Like when someone's doing that, and like it happens in the UK as well, right? I think it happens in every paper all over the world. But when it's written about you, is it best to just ignore it? Do you try and take them on? Like, how do you deal with something like that?
Well, if you're in a foreign country, sometimes it's lucky because I can't read Thai.
That's true.
So it does help, and I can't understand Thai when they speak quickly, so that was a lucky aspect. It's worse when you can read the language, believe me, because no matter what you say, players look, coaches look. They do read it. They see they only got a 5 and not an 8 off a journalist. Who does this journalist think he is? That was brilliant, and they do read, believe me, it happens. So if you can ignore it, well done. But I mean, what I've been lucky as is because of the age factor, I didn't have to hit social media too much. It was only coming in near the end. And social media has been horrific for footballers. Right. Believe me, because you've got loonies out there. There are people out there who should not be allowed near a computer. You have a keyboard license, and they are writing just pure fiction. But thing is, some of them, one of the clubs I was in, we ended up, one guy with 2 specific incidents. One guy was calling all my players unfit and lazy. So we had a player who was very good on IT, so we found him, and he was about 200 kilos, this bloke. That was the first thing. And then another one was constantly abusing my tactics and telling me where I was wrong and all this. And the problem was my president was reading it and saying to me, "Why didn't you do this? This fellow said you should do this." We traced him. He was 14.
Right. Brilliant.
And not only, and then when they found him, he was telling Jose Mourinho what to do as well. So my centre forward, shall we say, encouraged him not to do it again.
I think that's fair. I think that's absolutely fair. Yeah. So when you come into a club, you talked about like winning is a currency and it's the only thing that matters. Would you say that, like, do you have a particular, like, a style that you try to stick to, or is it just make the most of the players that you have there?
Well, reality is in Asia, there's very little transfer market. In Southeast Asia, it's basically you have the players you're given. And in some cases, again, hindsight, you shouldn't come in after the president signed all the players, because some of them are great. Some of them know what they're talking about. Others are clowns. I had one wake me at 3 o'clock telling me he told me the team which I should be picking next week. And I said, "Look, I guarantee you we'll get beat 3-0.
Right.
Said, how do you know that? I said, "Well, you've got us playing 4-4-3, which means we'll have 12 players on the pitch." And I said, and also one of them suspended anyway. So, which you should have realized. He's got another yellow card. I said, so we'd lose 3-0. And to be fair to him, he said, "Oh, I've been stupid, haven't I?" I said, "Well, you said it." Yeah. And but again, you're buying people, not just players. I was in one club where they bought the foreigners in, and a couple of them were good foreigners. A guy called Shankly, who played for Egypt in the Confederations Cup, scored against Brazil, played for Middlesbrough in the EPL. Great player, great professional as well, top class in everything he did. But we also had a couples, and one of them was match fixing.
Wow.
And that's a whole issue on its own, match fixing. But he was match fixing, and that destroyed the whole fabric of the club, and I mean, I've done well in most places, but other times I've failed. And in this particular club, I failed. And you tend to blame other factors, obviously, when you fail. But one was the uncomfortable selection of foreigners, shall we say, and the other was down to match fixing. That was, you can't beat it.
No, and so how did you find out that was happening? And was it the kind of thing of like he was just not scoring chances, he was trying to give away goals? How did you discover, and how do you deal with that?
Right. Well, I was totally naive when I came to Malaysia about match fixing, because I've played in Australia and England where it does go on, and it's going on still. Even in England, if you read a book by Declan Hill called The Fix, wonderful book, and that tells you all about how it was going on in England years ago. And probably to an extent has happened even now in the lower leagues. I don't think it's happening in the Premier League now because it costs too much to bribe a player. But
in the lower leagues,
lower leagues, and it's spot fixing as well. Like who gets the first throw in, and who gets a yellow card in the second half. All these type of things go on. But I first discovered it. I was walking off the pitch in a game for Johor, and the foreigner on the other team walked past me and said, "Coach, you're going to win 2-0. And so I said, "How do you know?" He says, "They don't think I can speak Malay, but I can." So we scored in the 84th and the 89th minute, which basically meant we didn't have time to score a third. And we didn't need to because 2-0 was enough. And it was what it was a spread fix. They were going to lose by 2 goals. So they weren't going to score because they weren't going to, simple as that. And the game was 2-0. Everyone was happy. And when you're winning, you don't think match fixing exists. When you're winning, you think you're a great coach. But there was one game where we were 2-1 down away from home, and that'd have been a fair result, to be honest. I wouldn't have moaned about 2-1. About 5 minutes to go, corner comes in, my goalkeeper knocks it into his own goal. Okay, I've done worse. Right. So 3-1. Last minute, 30-yard shot. Whoa, it must have dipped and swerved. We got beat 4-1. Okay. I watched the video the next day and for the younger ones, videos, those little square things. I watched the video the next day and I suddenly realized the ball didn't swerve. My goalkeeper was swerving.
Wow.
So I called in my captain, who was a decent lad. I said, "Come on, what happened? Tell me." He said, "Well, we tried to win because if they win, they got the bonus."
Okay.
He says, "But we had an agreement that if we were going to lose, we were going to lose by 3 goals because they'd all put a bet on where the bet was if they lost by 3 goals, they got the equivalent of their bonus. So they were going to come back no matter what with a bonus." So,
and is there any way? There's nothing you can do to stop that.
It?
Like you need the authorities or your owner to back you up, but they have no interest in doing that, I imagine.
Well, I naively said to one of my players, because I rang a player once and I said to him, and he was a Chinese lad, a Chinese Malaysian, and he was smart. I said, "Come on, how does it work?" Because I was fascinated how it's worked. Yeah. He said, "Well, they ring you up. They know how much money you're on because everywhere leaks. Everyone knows how much money each other's on." He said, "So if you're paid 1,000 a month, just for example," he says, this bloke will offer you 3,000 a month. And you say, no, I'm not going to do it. And he just gently says, "Does your mum still go to Tesco's on Saturday morning? Or does your little sister still go to that primary school?" Doesn't say anything bad.
Yeah.
But so you're not.
He lets you know that he knows. Yeah.
So I said to him, "Why didn't you go to the police?" Well, he burst out laughing, of course. He said, "Because," he said, "they're getting their cut. Down the line, everyone gets a cut in these deals. And so that's not going to happen." So I realized it wasn't going to happen. And, people say to me, "How do you stop it?" Well, the only way you can stop it is pay your players on time. That's okay. You'll never stop it all the time because there are corrupt people in football. In every country, there are people who are just greedy and have no time for them. But at the other extreme, I used to think it was black or white. It's not. There's grey, a large amount of grey. And part of the grey area is like, if you haven't been paid for 3 months, you've got 2 kids who are starving and you're living on noodles, and someone offers you to pay you 3 months' wages, you think, well, hey, or as one bloke put it to me once, what happens if your kid, coach, needed an operation? What would you do? I suddenly thought, you're right. I'd just say it's only a game. Now, I can honestly put my hands on my heart and say I've never took money and never done it. But I've had death threats. When I was in Singapore, I was used to get rang up by this bloke, and I did report to the police thing, because Singapore's quite a strict country. Yeah. And they said to me, the police, we can't contact him because he's ringing on a fax phone. And I didn't know that if you ring from a fax, it can't be traced. So anyway, and he was threatening me. I had to drop my star striker. I had to lose this game, blah, blah, blah. And I told one of the sponsors, who was a Chinese guy, he said, leave it to me. He said, so when he rang next time, I gave the sponsor my phone, and he just spoke quite a lot in Hokkien, a slang version of Chinese. And I heard a few names mentioned, and I suddenly realized all he'd done was he'd mentioned people higher up the food chain.
Right. Okay.
Never got another phone call again.
Wow.
So that was one way of stopping it.
That definitely works if it works.
But I mean, it's a fascinating thing. I was sitting on the bench once, and we'd gone 7-2 up, and we were due to win anyway. I knew that. We were a good side in Singapore, and I suddenly saw about 400 people leaving, and I said, "Why are they all leaving?" And my assistant, and I tried to get locals all the time, said to me, well, there's 9 goals, coach, and it doesn't matter what happens after 9 goals. You pay out on it's like a bell curve of bets. So the 9th goal went in, and so they all left because they all knew they got their money. And I found out later the opposition goalkeeper had got 9 goals at 28-1. Now we were going to win anyway. We knew that. They knew that, but he put 2 grand on. He got 56 grand. It worked out 66 grand or something. He paid a year's salary for 1 game.
Wow.
So this goes on.
So this is in Singapore, right? And is this this was when you were in charge of Home United?
Yes, it was.
And I think this is a spell that was really, really successful for you. So this is. You took part in the Asian Champions League, took the Singaporean team as far as a Singaporean team have ever been in the Asian Champions League. There was 2 players that jumped out at me just because of their numbers. In one season, Perez de Oliveira, 37 goals, Egmar, 29 goals, and Indra, 26 goals. You scored 104 in the league, conceding 42. That is some pretty exciting attacking football. Like, how was it? How was that season? It seems incredible.
Well, you often read about people saying, "Oh, they're great coaches." You're a great coach when you got great players. It really helps, believe me. And I had 2 Brazilians and a local lad who could score. Perez was a magician. He could do anything with a ball. Absolute magician. And I had one, again, a committee man, say to me, "Oh, this Perez is no good. He's too slow." I said, "Look, if he wasn't slow, you'd be watching him on telly, playing in Europe, or in England, or Italy, or Spain." I said, "He's that good, but he just didn't have great pace. That's why he couldn't make it at the top level, But he had everything else." Ekmar would have suited League 2 in England. Big, strong. He was a bit like the Brazilian player called Hulk.
Nice. Yeah.
Big, powerful lad. And he used to batter people. And Indra was the quickest player I've ever worked with. I used to do a lot of measures with light gates. So it wasn't just opinion. It was based on light gates. And the only player I've seen as quick was a fellow called Ned Zelic, who played in the Bundesliga and Ligue 1, an Australian lad. Indra was like lightning. But Indra was amazing. He couldn't do anything else except score. Yeah,
right. Okay.
and I always remember there was two cup finals. We won 2 cups while I was there. The cup finals in 2 years. Indra scored the winner in both, and in both times I was thinking of taking him off. I had a boy warming up in the first cup final, and I said, "Look, Indra, because he does nothing, but suddenly explodes." And he was one of these players who not only scored, he scored important goals.
Nice.
Now, that sounds stupid, but if you're winning 6-0, you'll get players who'll score the 7th or the 8th. But if it's 0-0, in a cup final, you want someone who makes it 1-0. And Indra had that ability, to do that. Smashing. I mean, and again, the dressing room there I was dead lucky as well. 2 locals, a fellow called Subramanian and Adi Iskander, were like captains. I didn't have a single problem the whole 3 years there. They dealt with the problems first in the dressing room. And I don't know what they did, but they did it. And we never had a discipline problem whatsoever. And how we used to do it was I had a good, I'll call him CEO, like a team manager, they call him over there. And he said to me, "Steve, you're CEO on the pitch. I'll be CEO off the pitch." I said, "Great, no problem." So he dealt with the contracts and all that. And how we used to do things was, because we won a lot, I would say to the players, "Look, we had 3 subs. I will make sure we use every sub in every game so that 14 lads got the bonus, not just 11. And I used to rotate the 14th player so that everyone everyone got a bonus some stage. And that helped cement the sort of like the unity, because they all know that this sub was coming on so that he got looked after. Because one day they might have been in the same boat, So it was a good atmosphere. And that, in many ways, the only problem we ever had was we had a salary cap.
Okay.
And we kept to it because we were the police team.
Right.
And I always remember Dwight York's agent rang me up and said, "Oh, Dwight York's heard about you. He wants to play for you." Now, when he said that, I knew he was lying for a start. Because he hadn't heard of me. It's the end of the story. So I said, "Okay." I mean, I love agents. You ever want a good laugh, listen to an agent. So he said to me, "How much money have you got?" So I said, "Look, I've got this much money." He said, "Oh, Dwight could do with a bit more." I said, "Mate, that is the amount for the month for the squad, the 16 players. That's not for Dwight. That was the squad money." And he said, "Oh," and it's funny, Dwight York didn't want to know me after that.
No, all of a sudden, strange that.
I mean, the inequalities of wealth in Asia are incredible. The best example was I coached Laos in the World Cup, and we played Korea. Well, we didn't play Korea; we were on the same pitch, and one of my lads was a smart lad, and I actually in a World Cup qualifier, I had to write to his boss to get him off at 12 o'clock on match day. He was an accountant, and so on match day he went to work in the morning in a World Cup qualifier and came in the afternoon, for the game. But he actually worked out that when we played Korea, Son Heung-min, who played, he was on more than my whole team put together for the year.
Jesus. It's something I kind of wanted to touch on, because even in the semi, like you made the run in the Asian Champions League with Home United, and you got to the semi-final, and you were doing really well. There was an incredible quarter-final beating Olympic Beirut 5-4 on aggregate. But then in the semi-final, you came up against Al Jaish in Damascus, and it seemed like, was it just a sudden step up in finances and level once you get there?
Well, what happened was, because in Asia the seasons are different. Because, and there has to be, because of things like monsoons, Ramadan, all sorts. You don't just have a normal season. Al Jaish had played the group stage. They were a good side. They played the group stage, then got through to the knockout stage, and it was their next season.
Right.
So and as they had then qualified for the knockout stage, they basically brought the whole national team in. So we ended up playing we played the Syrian national team, and the 6-1 was fair enough. Not a great. But I also then learned that you can get messed about. We went to Syria. and in the contract for the AFC, you have to supply 12 balls. They did, but they were all deflated. And I said, where's the pump? Oh, no, it's not in the contract, the pump. So we couldn't pump the balls up for the first training session. We had to go out and buy. And of course, where can we buy a pump? You're not going to tell us.
No one's going to sell you one. Yeah.
We went to the hotel, which looked like it had been bombed in the war, and we ordered chicken. We got beef.
Right.
Now, that's not a problem too much, except that I had Hindus on the side who couldn't eat beef. We ordered pasta. We got rice. The buses were turning up late. And honestly, it was just everything possible to upset you, and it was nonstop. I mean, now, to be honest, in the quarterfinal, we played in Lebanon. Now, that country was at war. And we were taken up to a hotel in a place called Tripoli, which we first thought was Libya. But, there's a Tripoli in Lebanon. And there was bullet holes in the stadium walls.
Jesus.
And there were guards on the gate, and these boys had real guns, I mean, monstrous guns. And so we were just smiling and nodding, and we were told we wouldn't recommend going out at night, the hotel. And even Perez didn't go out, and Perez was a rascal for going out at night. I won't tell you why, but I mean, he was successful on and off the pitch, Perez.
Yeah. And how difficult is it to get the players and yourself to concentrate on just the game when you're because you are making trips to war-torn countries or countries where they're trying to make it as uncomfortable for you as possible? How do you get them to concentrate, and how difficult is that to do?
Well, most countries are okay. Syria was different, and we had to in Syria in Ramadan, and I had a Thai player a few years later playing for me called Sutty Suksomkit. Smashing lad.
Right.
We went. I tried to take the players out as well to see the mosques, to see the souk, to try and get a bit of culture as well, because a chance of a lifetime to see some of these places. Yeah. We're walking down through the middle of Damascus, and Sutty Suksomkit comes screaming down to me, "Coach, I found a fish and chip shop," and it's the middle of Ramadan at lunchtime. And I'm going, oh no, Sutty, will you just put it away? Hide the chips, will you? And he didn't care, because Sutty didn't care about anything. He just wanted to play football and score goals.
Right.
But I mean, and again, you have unusual things. We played in the Maldives. Now, everyone thinks the Maldives is wonderful. Well, it is wonderful if you're on the islands. Where, to be fair, Home United, they used to put us on the island, and then. Because the actual island of Mali where you play isn't that nice. It's quite a heavily populated place. It's totally dry and things like this. So we would on the island. That meant we had to get a water taxi to training. We found out 2 players got seasick, which they didn't know because they'd never been in a boat before.
Right.
So there's things you just don't learn on your English full badge.
Yeah. Well, that's it. Yeah. So in Malaysia, you then continue in Malaysia and you take over at Perak as well. And here you also have 2 goal scorers that put up mad numbers. Manju Keita winning 2 golden boots, scored 50 goals in 75 games from what I could see. Were you fortunate with the strikers you got? Are you good at coaching strikers? What do you put that down to?
Again, I inherited Manju. I had two foreigners there. I inherited Abdullah Traore from Burkina Faso and Keita Manju from Guinea. Traore was fantastic. He spoke 5 languages fluently, was training to be a doctor, the absolute model professional. And his opening line to me was, "Coach, never trust an African."
Okay, right.
I said, I can't say that. He said, "Hey, coach, you're white. You can't say it. I'm black. I can say it." Okay. And he said, most of all, don't trust a Nigerian or a Cameroonian. He said, they're the worst of the lot. And I'm going, what? I mean, and he gave me great examples. And when we had trials one year, I used to invite Keita and Abdullah to sit next to me so that they, what their opinion was important. Again, culturally, they wanted to bring the right person in to be a foreigner. And they said, "Hey, that lad's a decent player." I said, "Yeah, he is." I said, I looked at the paper. His name was Preston McDonald. Now, that's a well-known African name. And Abdullah turns around to me and says, that's not Preston McDonald. I know Preston McDonald. You know, he said, let me sort it out. He went to the dressing room. We come back. Yeah, it's not him, coach. He bought the passport.
Wow.
So he had bought the passport. I mean, and then when you realize why, I mean, Keita Mann used to tell me, he says, Keita was always broke in the third week of the month.
Okay.
I said, Keita, I'm paying you good money. You're the highest paid. Why are you spending it all? What on? He said, I'm sending it back home. And he said, when you're in Africa, he said, you don't understand this, coach. You're English. He says, but he said, you might have 2 or 3 family members. He said, I've got about 200.
Yeah.
And when I go back, I've got to buy them all presents. And I've got to buy my mum a house. And it was a different culture shock. That was, again, I learned that you can't dictate why things happen. My view of poverty is not his view of poverty.
Yeah.
It was but with Keita, he was just a natural. Worked. I mean, it is amazing how he eventually left because he wanted to get more money, which I understood entirely right. Good luck to you. He went off to Brunei, and then I replaced him with a South American who was a good player, but he made a mistake. And again, this is where the word culture comes in. Keita was a Muslim, and we were playing in front of 60,000 Muslims every week. Keita would score, and he would do the Muslim sign to the crowd. Carlos scored in his first game, ran to the crowd, and crossed himself. No! I said, there was like a stunned silence. I mean, it was just culturally did the wrong thing. And he was never accepted like Keita. And Carlos was a bit of more of a South American Indra type. Didn't do much work, but scored. Right, Keita would work with a team and do everything. The only thing I wouldn't do with Keita, he asked for a goal bonus.
Right.
I said, no. I said, because you'll never pass the ball. I know you. I said, you'll want to take the corner and score and come in and head the crossing. I said, so no. I said, you'll get a team bonus, but you're not get a, you'll not get that. But I was lucky. I got a couple of great South Americans from Chile. They were really good pros that they came along. Mario Beros was his name. Played in the Chilean first league, top professional. I had Vedran Kukoc, a sweeper, a Croatian guy, great player. He got a concussion in one game. We took him to the hospital, did the right thing. He's in Perak. He got a brain scan. He said, "I'm sorry, but he's got a brain tumor." And we just went, "What?" And he didn't know. And it was only they only spotted it on look. He had a brain operation. It turned out to be a cyst. It was just water. It wasn't malignant.
Wow.
And he ended up coming back and playing the season after. Because he said this club, the Perak club, was great. The manager was great, or the president. They looked after him. They got him the best hospital, the best treatment. And so he said, "No, I'm staying loyal to this club."
Wow. That's incredible. And I think in times like that, it's really obviously incredibly important to know that the company you're working for effectively is able to look after you and willing to do the right thing. From Perak, I want to jump forward a little bit because you kind of talked about it a little bit, and I'm going to talk about Mumbai City. So here you were working alongside Peter Reid, I believe.
Yep, Peter Reid.
And you kind of alluded to it earlier, Nicolas Anelka, and I think Freddie Ljungberg arrived. So when you have big players like that coming into a league where there may be the marquee signings, the marquee players for that league, how do you motivate them? Because maybe those players, they're often accused of just wanting a payday or they're just there for the money. Is that an issue? And if it is, how do you deal with it?
Well, this was in the ISL, the Indian Super League. It was the first year because before it had been just the I-League. And I coached in the I-League for Mohan Bagan, who actually used to get 100,000 crowd when they played East Bengal. Incredible.
I did see their stadium was 120,000 people.
And, there are 100,000. And believe me, it's intense there. You go the next game somewhere else and there might be 3,000 there away from home. But if you're in Calcutta was the home. I mean, that was a completely different entity in terms of politics. That was like, I discovered the caste system there, how bad that is, and all sorts. So, and from day one, half the committee wanted me out.
Right.
because the other half of the committee had got me in. The other half that hated that half wanted me out. Oh, it was but 3 months of hell.
Yeah.
But anyway, yeah, you learn. So anyway, I went to Mumbai, and that was different. Superbly ran by top professionals, accountants, lawyers. The front man was a Bollywood superstar.
Wow.
And when they're superstars in Bollywood, they really are.
Yeah.
And so I got a call, and from a bloke who'd known me when I went to, in Calcutta, and he said to me, "Look, would you like to coach this team?" I said, "Yeah, great." He told me the money. I said, "Well, yes, without a doubt," because the money was silly in those days. He said, "The only thing is, you'll have to bring a big name with you."
Okay.
So I said, "Oh, Engelbert Humperdinck."
There we go. That'll do.
Which, of course, went straight to the keeper. I had no idea what I meant. So I said, "Look, I'll get you someone." So I rang up Peter Reid, because I've been with him in Thailand. And I said, "Do you want to come to this? This is how much money." He said, "Yep, I'll be there." So we came over. And as we got there, 2 weeks into the pre-season, again, this is where, again, the culture of that league was the president bought the players. Okay. President comes in all excited. "I've got you Nicolas Anelka." And I'll be honest, "Oh, no."
His reputation isn't great,
right? Oh, he'd just been suspended as well for doing that mark on his arm for West Brom. Yeah. I learned then, and I've said this many a time now, don't believe the image. The reality compared to the image is totally different. Exemplified by this fella. He was a model pro. If you said be there at 9, he was there 10 to.
Okay.
If you said wear one pink sock, one orange sock, he would do it.
Right.
After training, he'd stay on. He was humble. He was quiet. And also very quietly, he looked after some of the Indian boys, on the quiet, because he was he's obviously on a great salary. But he worked. And I always remember one game, he shouldn't have played. He was injured, but he says, "I'm playing. I am playing." And he played. He was playing on one leg. In the end, we took him off the last, 30 minutes to go. And he could have just gone to the dressing room, sat there, got changed, whatever. No, he put a bib on, sat on the bench, and was screaming with the lads to hold on to this victory we had. And I always remember at the end, he's probably never been on the bench before. He jumped and smashed his head on the glass bench. But he was a great bloke. I mean, and we had a centre back there, a German, and I had to look at his name, and I Googled him, and the first thing that came up, because I hadn't heard of him, the first thing came up was a picture of him marking Ronaldo.
Wow.
In the Champions League. He's playing for Dortmund, and he turned out he was an ex-roommate of Jurgen Klopp's.
Oh, wow.
And again, I looked at this bloke when he was playing, and I thought, he never misses a header. He never has to tackle. He steps in front. He never got his shorts dirty. I mean, he was just an outstanding defender.
Nice.
Again, I've only seen one better defender, and that was your Milan boy, Baresi.
Okay.
Having watched him in the flesh, watching how he worked and how he coached and how he did things, Baresi was on a different planet to me. I mean, it's to me, there's only one. They say the best footballer in the world. To me, it's Maradona.
Yes.
That's it.
Yeah, I think
But to me, Baresi was the next. He was the best footballer. I don't count Maradona as a footballer.
Yeah.
I count of him as something
different.
Absolutely, And again, lucky enough, when I was in Australia, Argentina played Australia, and I was with the national squad then, and I saw him train live. And again, there is nothing like him. You could spend the whole day talking about Maradona, how good he was. Again, how good he was, and how he was loved by his own people, and how he signed autographs and took photographs. Never complained.
No.
Smashing,
Yeah, it's beyond a cultural icon. Like I've been lucky enough to go down to Naples, and I'm planning on going down again. And when you realize just how much he's a symbol of that city, he's kind of gone beyond football, I think, Maradona. But yeah, his ability, I think, even with the Messi debate now, I think Maradona is still from a different planet, just on a different level.
I would like to have seen Di Stefano as well. To me, the three best players ever have been Argentinians. Messi, Di Stefano, and Diego.
Can you imagine being Argentinian? All of those players coming from your country. We just need one from England would be nice.
Yeah.
Just one. But so we're going to kind of wrap up a little bit because I'm aware of time. So currently, or most recently, you were with the Laos national team. You kind of talked about it a little bit. I kind of have one question here, but when you're in a continent with such big countries or kind of powerhouses such as South Korea and Japan, what were your short and long-term aims with the Laos national team?
Well, like I said, long-term aims is the next game.
Okay.
I'll be honest.
Right.
But if I'm being sort of philosophical, I would say the long-term aim was to close the gap.
Okay.
Now, in Laos' case, it was to close the gap on Vietnam and Thailand.
Okay. Yes.
Because we weren't going to close the gap on Korea and Japan.
No.
Not yet. If I was in Thailand, when I was in Thailand, it was to close the gap to Japan and Korea. That was the level. I mean, I think I put it in perspective, the lad who marked Son Heung-min, he was on $200 a month playing for his club a month. And he used to get up at 5 a.m. in the morning, go and get the vegetables, bring it back to his mum, sell it on the market with her, go to bed in the afternoon, and then come and train at night at 5 o'clock. We had to have national team training at 5 o'clock because they all worked.
They're all working.
Yeah. And and to get them off, I mean, it used to be hilarious. The lads used to laugh about it. They'd say, wonder what bonus we'll get. Because sponsors would give us $1 million bonus to beat Korea. Well, it may as well have been 20 million because it wasn't going to happen.
Yeah.
I mean, and I was really funny. I had a bloke tell me all about the tactics we did against Korea. I said, we didn't have any tactics. I said, we just couldn't get out of our own half.
Right.
I actually looked, 29th minute was the first time their goalkeeper touched it. Wow. And my centre forward was the Lao sprint champion as well.
Okay.
And I said, look, we played 10 at the back and 1 up front. And I said, when we get it, just welly it as far as you can, And it happened once. We got it. We knocked it behind the centre back, and my lad set off. And not only that, their centre back set off 3 yards behind him, caught him, threw him a dummy, and then passed the ball out. And I thought, no, we ain't going to happen. And it doesn't matter what tactics you have when someone like Son Heung-min just pushes the ball past you and goes.
Yeah. So how do you prepare your team there? How do you prepare your players if they know that like there's very little chance you're going to win the game, or there's very little chance you're going to get something from the game? How do you motivate them? How do you prepare them?
Well, the first thing you've got to worry about is that if they know they're going to lose, some of them might decide to lose by a certain score.
Okay.
And,
yes, fair. Yeah.
4 of my first 11 got suspended for life after I'd left. Now, I knew 2 of them were fixing, and I knew there were fixers on the local level, but I couldn't drop them.
No. Because
they were the 2 best fullbacks I had.
Okay.
By miles. And to be fair, they trained well. And one of them told me later, we won't do it in the big games. We won't do it at home. We'll do it away in friendlies.
Okay. Right.
And I mean, and again, I mean, it's like
it's kind of ethical match fixing.
Yes,
it's kind of weird.
Because they weren't going to win anyway. In fact, these lads were losing money by coming to play for the national team.
Right.
Because they weren't getting paid to play for the national team. They were only getting offered bonuses, which were never going to emerge anyway.
Yeah.
But it is really different. Like, I knew we were going to get physically dominated because in the Korean team they had Key, who was playing for Newcastle then, Son playing for Spurs, 5 others in the Bundesliga. And there was only 1 Korean player in the K-League player. So, and I said to the coach, I said, can you not stick a couple of reserves out? And he said the same. He said, I can't. He said, because if I get beat, it's Asia. If I get beat by Laos, I'm gone. He said, we've got to win. We survived until the 60th minute. When I say survive, it was about 3-0.
Right. Okay. Right.
And I kept my subs off till then because I knew that after that the petrol was going to go, and it was like watching a car run out of petrol. The lads just couldn't. couldn't do anything, and the lad, this is where you get again, good character. End of the game, Son walked up to me, shook my hand, said, "Thank you, coach, well done." And he said, "Give this shirt to the boy it was meant to be marking him." I said, "Yeah." Wow. And he laughed. He said, "I know what he was trying to do, because I told him, kick Son on the halfway line." Because I thought, don't do it close to the goal because they'll score a free kick.
Yeah.
I said, do it on the halfway line. I said, he might want to go off then because he's got playing for Spurs at the weekend. He said, he might not fancy this. But the lad said to me, he said, "Coach, I couldn't get near him."
Yeah, he was gone before I saw him. Yeah.
I mean, and it did put it in perspective. When I played for Tranmere in the youth team, we played Liverpool in the Liverpool youth. And the comment from the coach was, "Kick that big-nosed something in the Liverpool team." Well, the big-nosed something was Phil Thompson.
Right.
Who was playing centre midfield. And I suddenly realised there I was. Yeah. And there's the next level. Because there was like a force field around him. You couldn't get near him, and they battered us. And that always stuck in my head, even when I was like a 17-year-old playing. I thought, there's a new level.
There's levels.
And it's like cricket. I've played in India. We played against some of the top cricketers because both Peter and Reid and I loved cricket. We play against some of the big boys there. It wasn't the same game. No. Spinners who were like fast medium to me.
Yeah. Nice. Well, Steve, that's been absolutely fascinating. Before we go, we like to ask a few kind of quick fire questions before we let you go. So the first question is going to be the best player that you've coached.
Nicolas Anelka, or a goalkeeper called Hamoud Sultan in Bahrain. Very few people would have heard of him, but every Bahraini would have heard of him. He was just a freak of nature. Didn't train. Used to have a Cadillac. But his house had goats.
Okay. Nice.
Goats in the courtyard.
I love this guy already.
Yeah.
Okay. The best player that you've come up against?
In terms of, as a younger player, it would have been either Phil Thompson or Steve Coppell. I played also with Steve Coppell. Watching Brian Robson play for the Thai national team reserves against the first team, you realise he might have been a decent player as well. Because he was 56 at the time. Wow. Again, another superb bloke on and off the pitch. Same as Reedy. They're not big. They could be big-headed. They could be arrogant. They're not. Just decent blokes who you'd sit down, you can have a beer with them, cup of tea, whatever. And they love football, both of them. Yeah.
Nice.
So in those terms, but there was a player in the Malaysian league. I don't even remember his name, but he played in the World Cup for Cameroon. About 2 years before. Different level. Level. Yeah.
Nice. The best atmosphere you've witnessed as a manager, like a game or an atmosphere that you'll never forget.
Iran against Thailand, 0-0. About 5 minutes to go. I turned around, looked at Brian Robson and said, "I hope we lose." Because there was about 100,000 blokes with moustaches, and we were surrounded by blokes with guns. And I thought, oh dear me, that was scary. But there was also 100,000 at the cup final in Malaysia Cup final in with Perak. That was fantastic. I mean, it's just once you get those numbers in, the whole game changes. It's like it goes on in slow motion in some cases.
Yeah. Beautiful. Well, thank you, Steve. That was great. That was absolutely fascinating. I really enjoyed that. Thanks for coming on to the show. Viewers and listeners, don't forget to hit the like and subscribe button at the bottom, and we will see you next time in the next episode of our Away From Home series. Thanks again, Steve.